You know, I never thought I'd make it to 83. Not because I was unhealthy, though Lord knows I had my fair share of bad habits in my younger years, but because time seemed so infinite back then, like sand slipping through your fingers at the beach, too numerous to count. Yet here I am, sitting in front of this camera, with fewer wrinkles than most of my friends who are long gone, still able to climb stairs without wincing, and with a mind sharp enough to remember the day I almost lost everything, including my life. It was a Tuesday morning, just after my 60th birthday. The doctor's office had that antiseptic smell that always made my stomach knot up. "Mr. Thompson," he said, not looking up from my file, "your tests came back, and I'm concerned." He spoke about cholesterol levels, inflammation markers, pre-diabetic indicators, all these scientific terms that essentially translated to one brutal truth. My body was aging rapidly, breaking down from the inside. He gave me 5, maybe 10 years before serious complications would set in. Heart attack, stroke, dementia, pick your poison. I remember walking out of that office feeling like I'd been handed a death sentence. The cherry blossoms were blooming outside, spring in full glory, and all I could think was, how many more springs do I have left? 5, 10 at most. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just when I finally had the time and money to enjoy life, after decades of working 60-hour weeks, my body was calling it quits. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went to the kitchen at 3 a.m., opened the refrigerator, and stared at the contents. Processed meats, soda, leftover takeout in styrofoam containers. My pantry wasn't any better. Boxes and cans of food with ingredients I couldn't pronounce. And in that fluorescent light, with the refrigerator humming in the silent house, I had a moment of startling clarity. I had been slowly poisoning myself for decades. You see, I grew up in an era where convenience was king. TV dinners were modern miracles. Fast food was the reward after a long day. Sugar wasn't the enemy. It was comfort, celebration, reward. No one talked about inflammation or free radicals or gut health. Food was just food. I made a decision that night that changed everything. Standing in front of that open refrigerator, I promised myself, this isn't how my story ends. The next morning, I threw everything out. Everything. My neighbor Martha thought I'd lost my mind when she saw me filling garbage bags. "William," she said, "have you joined some kind of cult?" I just laughed and continued emptying my pantry of 60 years of bad habits. What followed was a journey that not only extended my life but transformed it in ways I never imagined possible. Today, I want to share with you the 5 foods that quite literally reversed my aging process, not in some magical, mystical way that defies science, but through the profound, evidence-based power of nutrition that most of us, even now, tragically underestimate. Before I tell you what they are, let me make something clear. This isn't about living forever. It's about living well, with dignity, independence, and joy for as long as we're here. It's about waking up without pain, remembering your grandchildren's names, and being able to tie your own shoes at 90. It's about quality, not just quantity. The first food that changed everything for me was something so humble, so ordinary, that you probably have it in your kitchen right now. Blueberries. Simple, small blueberries. I remember my grandmother, Eleanor, had a blueberry patch behind her farmhouse in Montana. As a child, I'd spend summers there, staining my fingers and lips purple while she laughed and told me stories of her own childhood. "These little blue jewels," she'd say, "are God's way of showing off." I never understood what she meant until decades later. After that doctor's appointment, I started researching obsessively. I found study after study showing that blueberries have the highest antioxidant capacity of any commonly consumed fruit. They're packed with something called anthocyanins. That's what gives them that deep blue color, which fight the free radicals that damage our cells and accelerate aging. So I started eating a cup of blueberries every single morning, mixed them into oatmeal, blended them into smoothies, or just ate them by the handful. Within 3 months, something remarkable happened. The persistent joint pain I'd attributed to just getting old began to subside. The brain fog that had become my constant companion started to lift. My skin, which had taken on that papery, translucent quality that comes with age, began to look firmer, Was it just the blueberries? Of course not. But they were the cornerstone of my new approach to eating, the gateway, if you will, to understanding how profoundly food affects the aging process. I still remember the day my daughter Jessica visited, about 6 months after I'd changed my diet. She stood in the doorway, shopping bags in hand, and just stared at me. "Dad," she said, "what have you been doing? You look different." She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but she knew something had changed. I looked younger, yes, but it was more than that. I had energy again, a clarity in my eyes that had been missing for years. The second food that transformed my aging process was something I'd spent most of my life avoiding. Because of misguided nutritional advice, eggs, whole eggs, yolks and all, for decades. I'd dutifully eaten egg white omelets, discarding the golden centers because we were all terrified of cholesterol. What a tragic waste. Those yolks contain choline, a nutrient essential for brain health that most Americans are deficient in. They're packed with lutein and zeaxanthin, which protect our eyes from the degeneration that so often comes with aging. And contrary to what we were told, numerous studies now show that dietary cholesterol from eggs doesn't increase heart disease risk. For most people, I started eating 2 eggs every morning, cooked in olive oil with spinach and tomatoes. The improvement in my cognitive function was noticeable within weeks. Words that used to sit on the tip of my tongue came easily again. I could remember where I put my keys, the names of people I'd just met, the plots of books I was reading. My friend Robert, who'd been showing early signs of cognitive decline, noticed the change in me and asked what my secret was. I told him about the eggs, the blueberries, my whole new approach to eating. He laughed it off initially. "You can't eat your way out of getting old, William," he said. But I persisted, sharing articles, studies, books. Eventually, he agreed to try it for 1 month. 6 weeks later, his wife Barbara called me in tears. "Whatever you told Robert to do," she said, her voice breaking, "keep telling him. He's coming back to me." She explained how he was remembering conversations again, engaging with their grandchildren, even working in the garden, something he'd abandoned as too confusing and frustrating a year earlier. The third food that became central to my anti-aging protocol was one that required me to overcome a lifetime of picky eating, fatty fish, particularly wild-caught salmon. Growing up in the Midwest in the 1940s and 50s, fish wasn't a big part of our diet unless it was fried beyond recognition. The smell, the bones, the unfamiliar texture, I'd always found excuses to avoid it. But the research on omega-3 fatty acids and brain health was too compelling to ignore. DHA and EPA, the omega-3 fatty acids found abundantly in fatty fish, are structural components of our brain cells. They're essential for maintaining the fluidity of cell membranes, which allows our neurons to communicate effectively. Studies show that people with higher levels of these omega-3 have larger brain volumes as they age and slower rates of cognitive decline. So I forced myself to learn to cook salmon. My first attempts were disastrous, overcooked, underseasoned, still with that fishy smell I detested. But I persisted. I tried different recipes, different cooking methods. Eventually, I discovered that a simple preparation, just lemon, dill, salt, and a quick broil, was all it needed. I committed to eating salmon twice a week, and within months I noticed another significant change: my skin. The chronic dryness that had plagued me for years began to improve. The fine lines around my eyes seemed less pronounced. My joints felt more supple, less creaky in the mornings. But the most remarkable change came about 6 months in. During my follow-up appointment with the same doctor who had given me that grim prognosis, he ran the same tests, reviewed the results, and looked up at me with bewilderment. "Mr. Thompson," he said, flipping through my file as if searching for an explanation, "your inflammatory markers have dropped significantly. Your blood pressure is that of a much younger man. Your cholesterol profile has improved dramatically." He looked at me suspiciously, as if I might be taking medications I hadn't disclosed. When I told him about my dietary changes, he gave me that patronizing smile doctors sometimes use when patients talk about alternative approaches. "Diet certainly helps," he said, "but these kinds of improvements usually require medication." He couldn't conceive that food alone could create such profound physiological changes. I didn't argue. I just smiled, thanked him, and continued. On my path, sometimes, experience is the most persuasive argument of all. The fourth food that became essential to my anti-aging regimen was something I'd always enjoyed, but never realized was a powerful medicine: garlic. My mother, Evelyn, used garlic in everything she cooked. Our small house would fill with its pungent aroma, especially on Sundays when she'd prepare a roast for the family dinner. As a teenager, I was embarrassed by this, worried that my clothes and hair would carry the scent to school. How foolish youth can be. What I didn't know then was that my mother was unknowingly protecting our cardiovascular health. With every clove she crushed, garlic contains allicin, a compound with potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. It helps reduce cholesterol, lower blood pressure, improve circulation, and even has antimicrobial effects. Some studies suggest it may help prevent the cognitive decline associated with aging and Alzheimer's disease. I began incorporating fresh garlic into almost every savory dish I prepared, not the pre-minced kind that comes in jars. That processing destroys much of the beneficial allicin. I'm talking about fresh cloves, crushed or chopped and allowed to sit for about 10 minutes before cooking, which maximizes the formation of those beneficial compounds. Within a year of making these dietary changes, something happened that I still find difficult to explain to people who haven't experienced it. My biological clock seemed to reset. I wasn't just halting the aging process. In many ways, I was reversing it. The arthritis that had begun to gnarl my fingers softened its grip. The afternoon fatigue that I'd attributed to aging disappeared. My digestion improved. Even my eyesight stabilized after years of steadily worsening prescriptions. My doctor, still skeptical, but now undeniably curious, suggested we do some advanced testing. The results showed that markers of cellular aging, things like telomere length and mitochondrial function, had actually improved. Whatever you're doing, he finally admitted, keep doing it. This is remarkable. But perhaps the most meaningful validation came during a high school reunion I attended 7 years. After changing my diet, I was 67 by then, mingling with people I hadn't seen in almost 5 decades. A woman approached me, squinting at my name tag, clearly not recognizing me. When I reminded her who I was, her jaw literally dropped. "William," she said, studying my face with disbelief, "but you look younger than you did at our 30th reunion." Others made similar comments throughout the evening. One former classmate even asked, only half-jokingly, if I'd had work done. I hadn't, of course. My only work had been in the kitchen, transforming my relationship with food. The fifth and final food that completed my anti-aging protocol was one that connects us to our most ancient human roots: bone broth. This might sound trendy now, with bone broth shops popping up in hip urban neighborhoods, but it's actually one of the oldest healing foods on the planet. Nearly every traditional culture has some version of it, a slow-simmered broth made from animal bones and connective tissue. My journey to bone broth came through my late wife, Margaret. She passed away before my health crisis, but she had always been interested in traditional cooking methods. She'd make stock from scratch, simmering chicken carcasses or beef bones for hours, filling our home with rich, comforting aromas. After her death, I'd abandoned those time-consuming practices in favor of convenience foods. But in my research, I kept coming across references to the benefits of bone broth for aging, the collagen for skin, elasticity and joint health, the glycine for detoxification and sleep quality, the easily absorbable minerals for bone density. So I dug out Margaret's old stockpot and began making bone broth weekly. I'd simmer grass-fed beef bones or pasture-raised chicken carcasses with a splash of apple cider vinegar, which helps extract the minerals for 12 to 24 hours. The result was a rich, gelatinous broth that I would drink daily, sometimes plain, with a sprinkle of sea salt, sometimes as a base for soups and stews. The effects on my joint health were nothing short of miraculous. The persistent knee pain that had limited my mobility began to recede. The clicking in my jaw when I chewed disappeared. My nails, which had become brittle and ridged with age, grew stronger and smoother. But perhaps the most unexpected benefit was improved sleep. I'd struggled with insomnia for decades, accepting it as an inevitable part of aging. Within weeks of incorporating bone broth into my daily routine, I began sleeping more deeply and waking more refreshed than I had in years. Sleep, as it turns out, is one of the most powerful anti-aging tools we have. During deep sleep, our bodies repair cellular damage, consolidate memories, and produce growth hormone, a key player in maintaining muscle mass, bone density, and skin elasticity as we age. By improving my sleep quality, bone broth was indirectly enhancing every aspect of my health and longevity. Now, I want to be clear about something. These 5 foods, blueberries, whole eggs, fatty fish, fresh garlic, and bone broth, aren't magic bullets. They work because they're part of a larger approach to eating that eliminates inflammatory foods while maximizing nutrient density. I also removed sugar, refined grains, seed oils, and most processed foods from my diet. I started intermittent fasting, giving my body 16 to 18 hours without food each day to focus on cellular repair rather than digestion. And food was just one piece of the puzzle. I also prioritized movement, nothing extreme, just daily walks and simple strength training to maintain muscle mass. I worked on stress management through meditation and spending time in nature. I cultivated deep, meaningful relationships, knowing that loneliness is as damaging to our health as smoking. But food was the foundation, the cornerstone upon which everything else was built, because what we eat doesn't just fuel us, it becomes us, cell by cell, molecule by molecule. And when we truly understand this, we can use food as the powerful medicine it was always meant to be. I'm not sharing this to boast or to claim I've discovered some revolutionary secret. These principles have been known by traditional cultures for millennia and are now being validated by cutting-edge science. I'm sharing this because, at 83, I've been given a gift I never expected: additional decades of health, vitality, and purpose, and gifts are meant to be shared. 23 years ago, sitting in that doctor's office, I was told to prepare for a rapid decline. Today, I hike with my grandchildren, travel internationally, volunteer teaching English to immigrants, and yes, occasionally dance with beautiful women at community socials. My calendar is fuller now than it was in my 60s, and I approach each day with an energy that confounds people half my age. Is this just good genetics luck? Perhaps partly. We all come with different genetic predispositions, different starting points in this journey called life, but increasingly, science is showing us that genes are not destiny. They're more like suggestions. It's our environment, particularly our food environment, that determines which genes are expressed and which remain dormant. I've watched friends with good genes deteriorate rapidly due to poor dietary choices, and I've seen others, like myself, with family histories of heart disease, diabetes, and dementia, completely alter our expected trajectories through conscious eating. Last year, my granddaughter Lily interviewed me for a school project on healthy aging. She asked me a question I'll never forget. "Grandpa, aren't you sad knowing you have fewer years ahead than behind you?" I thought about it for a moment and realized something profound. I don't feel that way at all. Yes, actuarial tables suggest I have fewer years ahead, but they're based on averages that include people who haven't made the choices I've made. More importantly, I've learned that life is measured not in years, but in vitality, in presence, in the ability to engage fully with each moment. Some people in their 50s are already old, burdened by preventable conditions, trapped in bodies that no longer serve them well, their horizons shrinking with each passing year. Others, well into their 90s, remain vibrantly alive, active contributors to their communities, eager participants in the grand adventure of life. The difference often comes down to the hundreds of small choices we make each day, particularly what we put on our plates. Food is not just sustenance, it's information. Every bite sends millions of chemical messages throughout our bodies, instructing our genes, influencing our hormones, determining whether we're building health or accelerating decay. If you're watching this and you're young, in your 20s, 30s, 40s, you might think you have plenty of time before you need to worry about these things. Let me tell you with all the wisdom of my 83 years, the time to start is now. the cellular processes that determine how you'll age in your 70s, 80s, and beyond are happening in your body as we speak. If you're already experiencing the challenges of advancing years, know this: it's never too late to change course. I was 60 when I transformed my relationship with food, already dealing with the early stages of several chronic conditions. Within a year, many of those conditions had reversed. Within 5 years, doctors could find no physiological evidence that they had ever existed. The human body has an extraordinary capacity for regeneration when given the right raw materials. Your body wants to heal. It wants to thrive. It's designed to function well for many decades, free from the chronic diseases we've mistakenly accepted as inevitable aspects of aging. My friend Susan was 72 when she was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Her doctor immediately reached for the prescription pad, ready to start her on the typical regimen of medications. "Is there anything else I can try first?" she asked. Remembering my story, the doctor, to his credit, agreed to give her 3 months to see if dietary changes could make a difference. Susan eliminated sugar, refined carbohydrates, and processed foods. She embraced the 5 anti-aging foods I've shared with you today. She started walking daily and practicing gentle yoga. 3 months later, her blood sugar had normalized. 6 months later, there was no evidence she'd ever been diabetic. Today, at 81, she's medication-free, vibrantly healthy, and a passionate advocate for food as medicine. I've seen similar transformations in people dealing with heart disease, autoimmune conditions, cognitive decline, and the various symptoms we collectively dismiss as just getting old: joint pain, fatigue, digestive issues, insomnia, anxiety, brain fog. None of these are inevitable. All can be improved, often dramatically, through conscious eating. As I sit here today, reflecting on the journey that brought me from that grim doctor's appointment to this moment of robust health and clarity, I'm filled with profound gratitude. Grateful for the crisis that forced me to change. Grateful for the researchers and healers who helped me understand the relationship between food and longevity. Grateful for each additional day I've been given to love, to serve, to experience the exquisite gift of being alive on this remarkable planet. If there's one message I want to leave you with, it's this: aging is inevitable, but decline is optional. You have far more control over how you experience the later decades of your life than you've been led to believe. Your food choices today are writing the story of your tomorrow. Will it be a story of gradual decline, increasing dependence, and narrowing possibilities? Or will it be a story of continued growth, adventure, contribution, and joy? The power to choose is yours. It lives at the end of your fork, in the contents of your refrigerator, in the priorities that guide your grocery shopping. It exists in the hundreds of small decisions you make each day about what you will or won't put into your body. I hope you'll choose wisely. I hope you'll challenge the cultural narratives that tell us deterioration is inevitable. I hope you'll discover, as I have, that our later years can be among our best, filled with health, purpose, and the profound contentment that comes from living in alignment with nature's wisdom. Before I go, let me leave you with one final thought. Beyond the physical benefits of the foods I've described, the blueberries, eggs, salmon, garlic, and bone broth, there's something else that happens when we commit to nourishing ourselves properly. We develop a deeper reverence for life itself, for the incredible intelligence that flows through all living things, for the intricate dance of nutrients, enzymes, hormones, and cells that makes our existence possible. This reverence extends beyond our own bodies to the soil that grows our food, the animals that sustain us, the ecosystems that support all life on Earth. We begin to see how profoundly interconnected everything is, how the health of our bodies is inseparable from the health of our planet. And this understanding changes everything. It transforms eating from a mindless activity to a sacred act. It elevates grocery shopping from a chore to an opportunity to vote for the kind of world we want to live in. It makes the preparation of food not a burden, but a meditation, a daily practice of gratitude and intention. So yes, eat your blueberries and salmon for the antioxidants and omega-3 south, but also eat them as an act of respect for the miracle that is your body, for the gift that is your life. Prepare your bone broth and crush your garlic with the knowledge that these ancient foods connect you to countless generations who understood, perhaps better than we do, the profound relationship between nourishment and vitality. In doing so, you won't just be adding years to your life, though I believe you will. More importantly, you'll be adding life to your years. And isn't that, after all, what we're really after? Thank you for listening to an old man's reflections. May your journey be long, your body strong, and your spirit ever curious and alive.